She always sat in the back row. Not because she wanted to hide, but because it felt safe there. The middle of the classroom was full of chatter and attention, and she had never been good at speaking up when eyes were on her. The desk near the window became her spot, a place where she could quietly observe and think. The sunlight would spill over her notebook in the mornings, and she liked how it made the paper glow. Most days, the teachers didn't notice her much. They saw her as quiet, maybe shy, maybe ordinary. Her notebooks were neat, but she never made a show of it. Pages were filled with careful handwriting and little drawings in the margins, sketches that no one really understood. Some teachers thought she was lazy because she never raised her hand. When questions were asked, she would sometimes answer softly, barely audible, and then go back to her notes, her mind already moving to other things. There was a world inside her that she rarely shared. Outside, she seemed average, and that was exactly how she wanted it to appear. Her classmates often underestimated her too. They whispered and laughed about her quiet ways. She never says anything interesting, some would say. She probably won't pass the next test, others would joke. She heard it all, though she pretended she didn't. She had learned early on that people's opinions were temporary. But the things she worked on, the things she loved, could last forever. At home, everything was different. Her small room was full of notebooks, pens, and a keyboard she had saved up for. Some nights, when everyone else was asleep, she would practice for hours. It wasn't just about skill. It was about feeling alive, about creating something that belonged only to her. The way she moved her fingers, the way she shaped sounds or words, it was all hers. Nobody could see it, nobody could judge it, and that was the way she liked it. School was a different world. The teachers rarely paid her much attention. One math teacher thought she struggled because she sometimes stared out the window during lessons. "She just needs to focus," he would say, shaking his head. But the truth was, she was not unfocused. Her mind wandered to solutions, to ideas, to experiments she might try later. The teachers mistook quiet observation for confusion or lack of ability. It was easier for them to assume she wasn't good than to try to understand her. She noticed the subtle ways teachers underestimated her. They gave her easier assignments, skipped over her during discussions, and assumed she would fail tests unless she worked extra hard. Sometimes, when a teacher would speak to the class about potential and talent, she felt invisible. The words never seemed to apply to her. It was like standing in the rain and having someone say, "Look at the sun shining," while the clouds hid it from your eyes. She could hear their opinions, but she didn't argue. She didn't fight for recognition. Instead, she let her work, her passion, and her quiet determination speak for her when the time was right. Her classmates sometimes tried to tease her. "Why are you always so serious?" They would ask. "You never do anything fun." She would smile faintly and continue what she was doing. Fun, in their eyes, was laughing loudly, drawing attention, or doing things that would impress others. Fun, in her eyes, was the thrill of getting something right. The beauty of solving a problem, the feeling of music flowing perfectly under her hands. They didn't understand it, and she didn't mind. They didn't need to. Some days were harder than others. The quiet could feel heavy, and the whispers of doubt from others could sting. When a teacher scolded her for not participating enough, or when a classmate mocked her silence, she would feel a pang of frustration. But those moments were brief. She had learned to channel those feelings into action. Every time someone underestimated her, she would practice a little harder, focus a little more, remind herself why she was doing what she loved. It wasn't that she wanted to prove them wrong, exactly. She wanted to prove to herself that the quiet work, the hours spent unseen, mattered. She wanted to know that when the time came, she could step forward and show her true ability. That thought alone was enough to keep her going. It gave her a kind of secret joy, quiet anticipation for the day when people would finally notice, not because they were looking for her, but because she had earned it. There were moments when small victories reminded her that she was on the right path. A correct answer, a sketch that turned out better than she imagined, a piece of music she could play perfectly on her keyboard. These moments were her encouragement. She would smile quietly to herself, feeling the satisfaction deep inside. Nobody else had to see it. The world could wait. She was patient. Her time would come. Teachers would sometimes comment on her work. Good effort, they would say, in a tone that was polite but lukewarm. They rarely recognized the creativity, the precision, or the originality in her approach. To them, she was doing what she was supposed to do, and nothing more. And that was fine with her. She didn't need their approval. What mattered was her own standard, her own progress, her own growth. She had learned that validation from others was fleeting. Real accomplishment was felt, not announced. Even with all the underestimation, she never lost hope. She watched others excel, sometimes with ease, and felt no jealousy. She learned from them, observed what worked, and incorporated it into her own practice. Her humility was not weakness. It was strategy. She knew the value of learning quietly, of building skill without drama. She knew that when she finally revealed her abilities, it would be more powerful than any boast. Her family noticed her dedication. They didn't always understand every skill she pursued, but they saw her determination. They encouraged her in small ways, a quiet nod, a word of praise, a gentle reminder that they believed in her. That belief, combined with her own inner drive, gave her the courage to keep going even when the world seemed to overlook her. As weeks turned into months, she began to notice patterns. Teachers who underestimated her were predictable. Classmates who teased her could be ignored. She started to see that her real challenge was not the outside world, but maintaining her own focus, her own passion, and her own sense of purpose. Every page she filled, every problem she solved, every note she played was a step toward the moment she would finally shine. Sometimes she wondered if the teachers would ever notice her true ability. She didn't let the thought distract her for long. She knew that recognition, if it came, would be a natural result of her effort, not something to be forced. For now, she immersed herself in her work, in the quiet joy of learning, in the thrill of creation. It was enough. It was always enough. The days passed with small routines, little habits that built her skill and character. The back row became her sanctuary, the place where she could prepare for the future without interruption. The sunlight on her desk, the quiet hum of the classroom, even the occasional whisper of doubt from others, all of it became fuel for her. She learned patience, focus, and the quiet strength that comes from believing in oneself when no one else does. By the end of each day, she would pack her notebook carefully, brush off her desk, and step out into the hallway with a calm determination. Nobody in the hallway guessed the depth of her dedication. It's the hours she had spent in silence, the skills she had been quietly mastering. She walked as if invisible, but every step carried the weight of preparation for a moment yet to come. And though the teachers might see only quiet, the world beyond those classroom walls was waiting for her talent, her brilliance, and her voice. It was only a matter of time before they and everyone else would realize that underestimation was a mistake. They didn't see it yet, but she knew it. She carried it with her every day, a quiet fire that grew stronger with each passing moment. In that back row, the girl who seemed ordinary was anything but. She was patient, she was observant, and she was relentless in her pursuit of mastery. Every silent day, every unnoticed effort, every moment of doubt from others was a brick in the foundation she was building. And when the right moment came, she would step forward, not with anger or spite, but with quiet confidence, showing the world exactly what she could do. For now, she remained in her seat, listening, learning, and preparing. Teachers underestimated her. Classmates ignored her. But she didn't mind. She was growing in ways that no one could see, shaping a future where the moment of recognition would finally arrive. And when it did, it would be unforgettable. The days began to feel heavier now. The quiet girl who had always kept to herself started noticing the small ways teachers treated her differently, but not kindly. They whispered to one another, sometimes even in front of the class, assuming she couldn't hear. She might struggle with this next project, one said. Maybe she should take an easier path, another suggested. The words were not meant for her ears, but she heard them all the same. At first, she felt a tight knot of frustration in her stomach. It was unfair. She had worked silently, putting effort into everything she did, and yet here they were, doubting her abilities. Her classmates joined in without realizing it. They mimicked the teacher's attitudes, laughing quietly or making comments under their breath. "She'll never get a perfect score," some whispered. "Why does she even try?" others said. At first, she felt a sting, a little ache of hurt. It would have been easy to argue, to stand up and defend herself, but she didn't. That wasn't her way. She had learned early that proving something with words alone would never feel as satisfying as proving it with action. So, she listened. She absorbed the doubt and the skepticism. She let it fuel her. There was a strange kind of motivation in being underestimated. Every comment, every doubt became a tiny spark inside her. She began to focus even more on her work. Every problem she solved, every note she practiced. Every page she filled in her notebook became a step toward a goal that only she fully understood. She imagined the day when her effort would speak louder than anyone's words, when the disbelief in the room would turn into silence and then into applause. That thought alone was enough to keep her going through the long, quiet afternoons. At home, her dedication increased. She stayed up later, waking in the early hours when the house was still quiet. The keyboard, the notebooks, the tools she used for her passion, everything became instruments of her determination. She practiced methodically, pushing herself to improve in ways that teachers could not imagine. She made mistakes, of course, but she celebrated them as lessons, each one a small victory toward mastery. She never recorded her progress for anyone else to see. She didn't need validation. The progress itself was reward enough. School became a series of challenges, though she didn't call them that. The teacher's low expectations were like invisible hurdles in front of her. Every assignment they gave, every class activity, was a test not only of skill, but of patience and composure. She noticed when a teacher skipped over her during discussions, assuming she didn't have an answer. She noted when a classmate rolled their eyes at her attempts as if they already knew she would fail. Each time, she allowed a quiet smile to form, because she knew the truth that she was preparing for something far greater than this moment of doubt. One day, a teacher came to her desk with a sympathetic tone. "Maybe this project is too difficult for you," the teacher said, adjusting the papers in front of her. She looked up, meeting the teacher's eyes, and nodded politely. "I'll try my best," she said softly. Inside, her determination burned. She wasn't discouraged. In fact, the suggestion only made her resolve stronger. If they thought she couldn't handle it, she would show them exactly how wrong they were, but not with anger, only with skill and effort. Her classmates noticed her change, though they didn't understand it. She no longer reacted when they whispered. She no longer flinched at the teacher's skeptical glances. Instead, she focused. Her notebooks became denser, her sketches more precise, her practice more disciplined. There was a rhythm to her effort, a quiet consistency that went unnoticed, but it was powerful. Every moment they doubted her, she turned it into energy. Pouring it into the things she loved, the classroom itself became a stage of silent tension. Teachers tried to gauge her abilities based on her visible participation, but they were missing the larger picture. They didn't know the hours she spent at home, the tiny victories she had achieved alone, or the depth of her understanding. They assumed effort equaled ability, but she had learned that true mastery was invisible until revealed. And she was getting ready for that revelation. Small victories gave her hope. A test score slightly higher than expected, a note perfectly played on her keyboard. A sketch that came out just as she imagined. These were her secret celebrations. No one else needed to witness them. She would sit quietly, close her eyes, and feel a sense of satisfaction that no teacher could take away. These victories were her silent rebellion against the doubt around her. Every day, she built confidence that was unseen but unshakable. The pressure increased as deadlines approached. Teachers openly suggested lowering her goals. "Maybe aim for something more realistic," they said. "This might be too much for you," she didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she stayed after school, working alone, practicing, revising, preparing. The pressure of their doubt became a ladder, each step taking her closer to the moment she would finally show what she was capable of. Sometimes, she would look around the classroom and feel a mixture of amusement and determination. The teachers who doubted her, the classmates who teased her, all of them were blind to the effort she was putting in. It was almost funny, in a quiet way. They thought they were assessing her, but really they were only seeing a small fraction of who she was. The real work, the real preparation, happened outside of their eyes, and that gave her a strange sense of freedom. She could build her skill without anyone interfering, without anyone misunderstanding her. There were moments of doubt, of course. Late at night, when she was tired, she wondered if maybe they were right. Perhaps she couldn't reach the level she wanted. Perhaps she was aiming too high. But those moments were fleeting. She would take a deep breath, remind herself of the progress she had already made, and return to her work with renewed focus. She had learned that perseverance was more powerful than reassurance from others. Belief in oneself, she realized, could withstand doubt from the entire world. Her family continued to support her quietly. They noticed the change in her demeanor, the way she carried herself with calm determination. They didn't ask for explanations. They didn't need to. They offered small words of encouragement, reminders that she was capable, and trusted her to continue her journey. Their support was steady, a silent pillar she could rely on when the world seemed to underestimate her. One day, a teacher made a comment in front of the class that stung more than usual. "I don't think she's ready for this level of work," they said, and the words echoed in the room. Her classmates murmured agreement. A few of them smirked, thinking she would struggle. She felt a flash of irritation, but quickly transformed it into focus. If they believed she couldn't do it, then she would make sure they were wrong. In a way they could never forget, her preparation became almost ritualistic. Each day she reviewed her work, corrected mistakes, and sought ways to improve. She created small challenges for herself, tests that went beyond what the classroom required. She pushed harder, not because anyone was watching, but because she was preparing for a moment when it mattered most. Each correction, each practice session, each small victory added strength to a foundation. She was quietly building. She also began noticing the subtle changes in herself. The quiet determination had made her more confident, more patient, more aware of her own abilities. She no longer felt intimidated by teachers' opinions or classmates' whispers. Instead, she felt empowered by her own preparation. She realized that being underestimated wasn't a weakness, it was an opportunity. Every underestimation became fuel. Every doubt a stepping stone toward her own potential. Classmates started to sense that something was changing, though they couldn't quite identify it. She walked taller, her eyes clearer, her movements confident. They noticed her diligence, the way she seemed absorbed in her work, and the quiet pride she took in her progress. Some whispered among themselves, trying to figure out how she managed to stay so focused, so steady. But she didn't explain. She let them wonder. Mystery, she realized, could be a powerful ally. Teachers, too, began to notice subtle improvements, though they didn't understand their significance. "Her last assignment was better than expected," one remarked quietly. Another nodded, but still seemed hesitant to give her full credit. They were seeing the surface, but not the depth. They didn't yet see that she was preparing for a moment that would go far beyond the classroom's expectations. Every day, she reminded herself that the goal wasn't to prove anyone wrong. It was to grow, to learn, to master her craft. The teacher's doubt and classmates' teasing were just background noise. What mattered was her own progress, her own skill, her own passion. She focused on each small step, each incremental improvement, understanding that greatness is built quietly, patiently, and consistently. The days of doubt and pressure transformed into a silent rhythm of growth. Each morning, she arrived at school ready to observe, learn, and prepare. Each afternoon, she returned home ready to practice, refine, and strengthen her abilities. She learned to embrace the challenge of being underestimated, turning it into a powerful motivation. The world might not see her effort now, but that didn't matter. Her time would come. She imagined that moment often. She pictured herself stepping forward, calm and composed, revealing her skill to the world. She imagined the surprise in the teacher's eyes, the silence of disbelief among her classmates, and the quiet pride she would feel in herself. That vision became her guide, her secret inspiration. The reason she could endure the pressure, the doubt, and the underestimation every single day. And so, the quiet girl in the back row continued to work, to practice, and to grow. Teachers underestimated her. Classmates doubted her. But she remained patient, determined, and focused. She was preparing for a moment that would change everything. A moment when she would finally step out of the shadows and show exactly what she was capable of. And every day, she inched closer to that moment, one quiet, determined step at a time. The day she had been quietly preparing for finally arrived. It started like any other, with the usual sunlight spilling into the classroom. Soft murmur of students finding their seats and teachers moving around with papers and instructions. But there was something in the air, a tension that made her heart beat a little faster. Today was the day of the presentation, the performance, the test, or the challenge she had worked so long for. She didn't feel nervous in the way people expected. She felt focused. She felt ready. Every doubt she had absorbed, every sneer she had endured, every comment about her being average or struggling had fueled her in a quiet, steady way. As she walked to her seat in the back row, she noticed the glances of her teachers. They exchanged looks, some doubtful, some polite, some skeptical. She didn't let their opinions distract her. She had learned long ago that their doubts were temporary and unimportant. What mattered was the skills she had cultivated, the hours she had spent alone, the readiness she had built within herself. She settled into her chair, adjusted her materials, and took a slow, calming breath. Her classmates, unaware of the depth of her preparation, whispered and speculated. "Do you think she can actually do it?" one asked. Another shrugged. "She's always quiet." Probably not. They had seen her work quietly for months, but none of them understood the effort, the dedication, or the countless hours she had spent in private practice. They assumed that the quiet girl in the back row could never rise to the challenge, and that assumption, as always, only strengthened her resolve. The teacher began to explain the task, the presentation, the test, or the performance. Instructions were given, papers were distributed, and a sense of expectation filled the room. Everyone was watching, though no one expected much from her. The teacher called names, giving each student their turn, saving her for last. She watched her classmates take the stage, noting how the room responded. Some succeeded, some struggled, but she remained calm. She didn't compare herself to them. Her focus was inward, on the skills she had honed and the plan she had built in her mind. Finally, it was her turn. Her name was called, and for a brief moment, the room was still. The teachers looked at her with polite curiosity, the classmates with a mix of anticipation and doubt. She stood, walked toward the front, and felt the eyes of everyone upon her. She didn't falter. She had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed it in her mind, and prepared for it in ways that no one could see. Every step she took felt measured, deliberate, and confident. She began. At first, it seemed quiet, almost understated. Some of the teachers leaned back, their skepticism visible. Some classmates exchanged glances, waiting for her to stumble or falter. But then, slowly, her skill began to shine. Every note, every word, every action she performed was precise, deliberate, and powerful. The quiet girl in the back row was no longer quiet in her ability. She was commanding attention without arrogance, showing mastery without boasting. The room changed. The teacher's skeptical expressions softened as they realized that she was far beyond what they had expected. They had underestimated her, and now their assumptions were being challenged in real time. The classmates, too, grew silent. Whispers ceased. Smirks vanished. Eyes widened. Nobody had expected this level of competence, of focus, of talent. The quiet girl who had been overlooked for so long was now the center of attention. But not because she demanded it, because her skill demanded it. Every moment of her preparation became visible. The hours spent alone, the mistakes corrected in private. The small victories celebrated in silence, all of it, culminated in this moment. She could feel the energy of the room shift, the disbelief turning into awe. The applause had not yet started, but it was coming. She could see it forming in the expressions around her: surprise, admiration, respect. This was the payoff for every underestimation, every doubt. Every quiet day of preparation, she continued, confident and unflinching. Her movements were fluid, her delivery precise. The teachers who had doubted her earlier now sat upright, watching closely, reassessing their assumptions. Some of them looked almost embarrassed for having misjudged her. She didn't seek their approval, but she could sense their recognition. The classmates who had whispered and mocked her were now captivated, unable to look away. They were witnessing something they hadn't anticipated, and it was powerful. The moment was not easy. She stumbled once, just slightly, a minor error that could have broken her focus. But she had learned resilience. She paused, adjusted, and continued seamlessly. The minor error became irrelevant, overshadowed by the strength of her overall performance. In that instant, she felt a surge of confidence. She realized that she had grown not just in skill, but in the ability to remain calm under pressure, to turn setbacks into strengths, and to command her own narrative. Her mind flashed back to the months of preparation, the quiet nights, the sacrifices she had made, the teasing she had endured, and the skepticism she had faced. Every single challenge had brought her to this point. Every teacher who had underestimated her, every classmate who had doubted her, had inadvertently fueled her determination. She understood then that the doubts of others could be powerful motivation if channeled correctly. She had used it to build not just skill, but resilience, focus, and confidence. As she neared the end of her performance, the room was completely silent. Every eye was on her. Every teacher was fully attentive, some with slight disbelief, some with admiration, some with a mixture of both. The classmates, too, were completely engaged, no longer whispering or speculating. They were watching history unfold before them. The quiet girl, underestimated and overlooked, demonstrating abilities far beyond anyone's expectation. Then it happened. The final moment, the last note, the closing statement, or the final action. She executed it perfectly, with precision, confidence, and grace. The room erupted not just with applause, but with an energy that seemed to lift the air itself. Teachers stood, some clapping, some shaking their heads in amazement. Classmates cheered, some even rushing forward with questions and admiration. She smiled quietly, not from arrogance, but from the satisfaction of knowing that all her preparation, all her patience, and all her dedication had paid off. She walked back to her seat, calm and composed, her heart still steady, but her mind alight with the realization of what she had accomplished. She had proven something far beyond a grade or a score. She had proven that being underestimated did not define her, that the quiet girl in the back row, the one overlooked and ignored, could rise to the occasion and blow everyone away with skill, confidence, and perseverance. The teachers approached her slowly, some unsure of what to say. "That was impressive," one finally managed. Another nodded, almost speechless. They had expected ordinary, and they had been given extraordinary. Her classmates, too, approached her with curiosity and admiration. Questions were asked, compliments were given, and respect was earned. She didn't need to explain herself or her months of preparation. The performance, the demonstration, the act itself had communicated everything that words could not. As the day ended, she packed her materials with the same quiet composure she had always had. But now, there was a subtle change in the air around her. Teachers and classmates alike looked at her differently. The quiet girl who had been underestimated was now someone they could no longer ignore. She had not sought attention, but she had earned respect. And more importantly, she had proved to herself that her dedication, patience, and skill could overcome any doubt or skepticism. That evening, she reflected on the day. She thought about the months of quiet preparation, the skepticism she had faced, and the inner strength she had built. She realized that this moment was not just a single performance or presentation, it was a turning point. From this day forward, she knew that she could face any challenge with confidence. That being underestimated was not a limitation, and that true skill and dedication would always shine through in the end. The world had finally seen her potential. But she knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more moments where doubt and skepticism would arise. But now, she carried the proof within herself that preparation, perseverance, and quiet determination could transform doubt into admiration, skepticism into respect, and underestimation into triumph. As she closed her notebook and turned off the light in her room that evening, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The quiet girl in the back row had stepped forward and shown her brilliance. She had done it not with words, not with defiance, but with skill, patience, and unwavering focus. And she knew that from this day onward, the world would never underestimate her again. Not because she demanded recognition, but because she had proven herself in the most undeniable way. The room was silent for a moment. The kind of silence that comes after something unexpected and extraordinary has just happened. The quiet girl in the back row had completed her performance, presentation, or test, and no one had anticipated what they had just witnessed. The teachers, who had underestimated her for so long, were frozen, blinking as if to make sure they had seen it correctly. Their skepticism, the doubts they had held for months, seemed almost foolish now. Every assumption they had made about her ability had been shattered in minutes. Her classmates stared in disbelief. Some mouths were slightly open, eyes wide, as if they were trying to process what they had just seen. The girl who never spoke, who never raised her hand, who was always quiet and invisible, they had expected nothing. And now they were realizing that she was not only capable, but extraordinary. Some of them whispered to one another, trying to make sense of it. Did she really do that? I thought she couldn't. Their whispers died down as they looked closer, noticing the precision, the confidence, and the skills she had shown. The teachers slowly began to recover from their initial shock. One of them finally spoke, almost in a whisper, that was impressive. Another nodded, still holding a look of disbelief, as if trying to reconcile what they had assumed with what had actually happened. They approached her cautiously, unsure of how to react. Some offered words of praise, some simply nodded, speechless. They had underestimated her for months. Now they had to accept that their judgment had been completely wrong. She remained calm throughout it all, standing quietly as the room adjusted to the reality of her performance. She didn't smile too broadly, didn't boast, didn't gloat. She had no need to. The work spoke for itself. The skill, the confidence, and the result were all proof enough. She had always known her own ability. And now, the world around her was finally seeing it too. Some classmates approached her, their expressions a mixture of awe and curiosity. "How did you do that?" one asked, genuinely surprised. "I had no idea you were this good," another admitted. She smiled faintly, humbly. "I've been practicing," she said simply. She didn't need to explain more. They didn't fully understand the years of quiet work, the hours spent alone, the preparation no one had seen. But they could sense that it had been more than ordinary effort. It had been dedication, focus, and passion. The energy in the room had shifted. Teachers who had been skeptical were now attentive, observing her every move with newfound respect. Classmates who had whispered and doubted were now silent, some even taking notes or asking questions to understand what they had just witnessed. The quiet girl who had been underestimated had become a source of inspiration, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that true skill often grows in silence, away from attention and praise. Some teachers approached her desk after the event. They spoke carefully, their words deliberate. "I didn't realize you could do this," one said. "You've clearly been working very hard," she nodded politely, accepting the recognition without arrogance. Another teacher added, "I think we all underestimated you." She simply smiled faintly, understanding that their acknowledgement was long overdue, but also knowing that she had never needed it to validate herself. Her effort, her skill, and her determination had always been enough. Her classmates began to see her in a different light as well. Those who had teased or ignored her now looked on with a mix of admiration and humility. Some approached her with sincere apologies for their earlier behavior. Others asked for guidance, hoping to learn from her. She didn't judge them. She understood that their skepticism came from a lack of understanding, not malice. Instead, she allowed her actions to inspire, to show that diligence, patience, quiet determination could overcome any assumption. The applause, when it came, was thunderous. It was not just polite clapping, it was a genuine acknowledgement of her talent. Teachers and students alike joined in, some standing, some cheering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The moment felt almost surreal, as if the room had collectively realized the truth that had been hidden in plain sight all along. She had been underestimated, ignored, and overlooked. But now, her skill demanded recognition, and no one could deny it. She returned to her seat, calm and composed, her heart steady, but her mind alive with reflection. The moment had been everything she had imagined, yet more. The teacher's doubts, the classmates' whispers, the skepticism she had endured a libet had led to this defining moment. And now she understood something important. The power of preparation, focus, and perseverance was far greater than the opinions of others. After the event, the teachers gathered to discuss what they had just witnessed. Their conversation was a mix of surprise and acknowledgement. They admitted that they had misjudged her abilities. Their assumptions had been incorrect, and that she had far exceeded their expectations. They began to rethink their approach to other quiet or underestimated students. Realizing that talent and dedication can exist in forms that are not immediately visible, she had not only proven herself, but had also challenged their perceptions, teaching them a subtle but important lesson. Meanwhile, classmates began to approach her with questions, curiosity, and admiration. They wanted to know how she had prepared, what she had practiced, and how she had maintained her focus. She answered humbly, without pride or arrogance, sharing just enough to inspire them while keeping the depth of her private work personal. Her story became a lesson in perseverance, in quiet effort, and in the value of believing in oneself, even when others do not. Even those who had once doubted her most openly were now respectful, some even apologetic. They recognized the dedication behind her achievement, and some admitted they had been wrong to underestimate her. She accepted their acknowledgement with grace, understanding that their change in perspective was a result of her effort, not confrontation. She had not sought revenge or validation. She had only sought to grow, to improve, and to prepare for the moment she knew she was capable of handling. The day continued, but the energy had shifted permanently. Teachers began to pay closer attention, not just to her, but to other students who might also have hidden potential. Classmates talked quietly about the lesson they had just witnessed, about how appearances can be deceiving and how quiet determination can lead to extraordinary results. She remained in her seat, observing silently. Aware that she had sparked something greater than applause or recognition, she had sparked awareness, respect, and curiosity. She reflected on the months of quiet preparation that had led to this moment. Every late night, every small victory, every mistake corrected in private had built the foundation for this success. The teacher's doubts, once a source of frustration, had become fuel. The classmates' whispers, once hurtful, had become motivation. And now, as she experienced the recognition she had earned, she understood that every challenge, every underestimation, had been a necessary part of her growth. That evening, she sat alone with her materials, reflecting quietly. The applause and acknowledgement were satisfying, but even more satisfying was the knowledge that she had done it on her own terms. She had not relied on encouragement, on praise, or on attention. She had relied on herself, her discipline, her focus, and her determination. She had proven, most importantly to herself, that being underestimated was never a barrier, it was an opportunity. Her teachers would never forget this day. They would remember the quiet girl in the back row who had defied every assumption. They would remember the skill, the focus, and the poise she had displayed. Some would share the story with other colleagues, using it as an example of the importance of looking beyond appearances. Some would reconsider how they evaluated students, realizing that talent and dedication can be quiet, subtle, and invisible until fully revealed. Her classmates, too, would carry the memory of this moment. They had witnessed someone rise above doubt, skepticism, and underestimation. They had seen patience, preparation, and quiet determination triumph. And for many of them, It became a reminder that the effort they put in, even when unseen or undervalued, could lead to extraordinary outcomes. She had set an example not through words or confrontation, but through action and mastery. In the days that followed, the environment in the classroom subtly changed. Teachers began to watch her with more respect, some offering opportunities she had previously been denied. Classmates approached her with curiosity and admiration, asking for guidance and support. The quiet girl who had once been underestimated now became a source of inspiration, a reminder of what could happen when dedication and perseverance meet opportunity. She never let the attention change her. She remained humble, calm, and focused. The recognition was welcome, but it was never the goal. Her goal had always been growth, mastery, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she could achieve something extraordinary. The applause, the admiration, and the acknowledgement were byproducts of her effort, not the motivation behind it.